Hey there, it's Dr. Sarah. Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. Today, I'm talking to Dr. Alda Ngo, a registered doctor of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncturist, who specializes in integrated fertility and obstetrical acupuncture and medicine. Today, we'll be talking about the importance of mindfulness and meditation in the context of infertility, pregnancy loss, and pregnancy after infertility and loss. Now, before we get going with the podcast, I just wanted to let you know about an upcoming opportunity. Dr. Alicia and I are hosting an online event free of charge on April 24th, 2021. It's going to be a day of empowerment and information to help you prepare for childbirth and the postpartum experience. Head to the link in our show notes below, or visit the link on our Instagram page at She Found Motherhood. Now we'll get into the podcast right after this message.
Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. We are Sarah and Alicia, two doctor moms who are creating a community rich with high quality information to support people through the journey from pregnancy to parenthood.
Our goal is to empower with knowledge and decrease the anxieties during this time in our lives. We cover topics from fertility through the fourth trimester, with the odd birth story sprinkled in.
Come join us on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood, or check us out on our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca.
Some of these podcasts have been sponsored, which allows us to continue putting out free, amazing content. But don't worry, this won't affect our advice or recommendations, and we only partner with companies we know and trust, or have come highly recommended to us by you, our listeners.
She Found Health is meant for general medical information only. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The information you hear does not apply to every situation. If you have questions or if you've received different advice, please contact your healthcare provider. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition. The views expressed by She Found Motherhood and our guests are not representative of any institution with which we are affiliated.
Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. We are so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, thank you. So I was hoping that you could start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and sort of what brought you to this place in your career.
Okay. So, Mr. Doctor of Chinese medicine, acupuncturist. I've been practicing since 2005 and specializing in integrated reproductive fertility and obstetrical acupuncture and medicine since 2007. I'm currently co-owner of Whole Family Health. It's an integrated wellness center in Edmonton that focuses on integrated family medicine and reproductive health. And I'm also super jazzed about mindfulness meditation. My first experience with meditation was under the guidance of my mom when I was 10 years old. And now as a grown-up, I have been dedicated to mindfulness practice for over 15 years. So, I got into reproductive medicine. I didn't know it at the time, but I ended up, I was helping people with their fertility challenges. And then I ended up having my own challenges, and my own fertility journey was like 7+ years long. So I'm very intimate with the process and the inner world of what it's like to go through that. And so both, professionally and also personally. So I'm quite, inspired to help people who are going through those challenges as well.
Oh, thanks, Alda. Yeah, I think it's really interesting when what happens in our personal life is so impactful, it can really be empowering in terms of changing the work that you do, right? Yeah. And how your career can shift. I find motherhood does that to a lot of people.
Totally.
Yeah.
It definitely informs my practice, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm very excited to be teaming up with Stephanie Curran from Elements of Health. I know you've had her on your podcast too.
Oh, yeah.
So the two of us, we have lots in common. So Stephanie, like me, we're both practitioners of Chinese medicine. We both specialize in reproductive health. We've also both had our own fertility journeys, and we're both mindfulness practitioners. So, together we're super inspired to be offering online mindfulness programs for fertility. And today we'll be speaking to our mindfulness program for those who are pregnant after infertility or pregnancy loss. Yeah. So I'm just like especially invested in supporting people on this particular trajectory because, I've had my own 7-year fertility journey, including 2 pregnancy losses before finally becoming a mother. And yeah, I don't know. It's like when people ask me, what was it that finally helped me to like create the healthy pregnancy in the end? It's super hard to say. Of course, I like accessed, the strengths of both Western and Eastern medicine to like investigate and support my body. And then of course, my mindfulness practice really became one of the key pieces that carried me through the fertility journey because it's like crazy making, right? Like it's just, it's hard to, say if any one thing really did it, but I know that, the whole experience basically like disabused me of the illusion that I had any kind of ultimate control over the matter. Most things in my life, I can kind of like set my mind to it and like make it happen. But with this, it was like, it didn't matter how like, how much effort I put into doing all the things totally perfectly. I just like couldn't make it happen when and how I wanted it to happen. And, so it was like about doing all the things and taking care of all the pieces that needed to be taken care of and try not to like lose my mind as I was going through it and try not to lose my sense of self in the process as well.
Yeah. And, I have supported lots of people through infertility and pregnancy loss. And I have to say that I don't know the research as well, but I know that mindfulness and meditation is such a powerful tool because there's so much that is beyond our control and so much that we just don't know, right? Your tests are normal. I'm doing quotations here. No one can see me because we're on a podcast, but everything seems, medically, but it's still happening, right? And so I think mindfulness is such a powerful tool to help get to that sort of inner level and deeper, caring for our bodies and our fertility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was my experience. My mindfulness practice was, it kind of buoyed me through the whole thing,
Yeah. So do you want to speak a little bit about, some of the research and the information that we have behind how stress and trauma impacts those that are going through infertility and pregnancy loss?
Yeah, totally. So we know that infertility and pregnancy loss carry a psychological toll and even a form of trauma. So in terms of infertility, the research shows that people dealing with infertility suffer from levels of anxiety and depression that are actually similar to like quite serious illness like HIV and cancer and heart disease. It's like this existential thing. Some researchers have actually even linked conception through ART, assisted reproductive technologies, which of course like they're a huge investment, right? Like they're like this, huge financial, energetic, emotional, such a loaded, high pressure experience. So researchers have actually linked conception through ART to issues such as, of course, increased anxiety about pregnancy loss, reduced maternal confidence, low self-esteem, and even like delayed mother-infant attachment and overprotective parenting, which,
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense, right? When you think about the trauma that people have gone through with infertility and loss.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. You spend your whole life like trying not to get pregnant, right?
I know.
It's super easy.
I know.
Why isn't this working?
I know.
So that's infertility. And then in terms of pregnancy loss, according to the largest ever study into the psychological impact of early stage pregnancy loss, a very recently published article in the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology shows that 1 in 6 people actually experience long-term post-traumatic stress following miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy. So a miscarriage can be a traumatic loss that, fits the, diagnostic statistical manuals, PTSD definition. So, for many people, miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy will be like the most traumatic event that's happened to them in their lives up to that point, right? And so symptoms of PTSD can include like reliving the traumatic event. So like through flashbacks, nightmares, feeling emotionally numb, avoiding places that, could be a trigger to memories of the trauma. It can present as insomnia or the inability to concentrate, like irritability, even like feeling skittish. So they're, very impactful disruptions to the reproductive story that can totally carry forward throughout a pregnancy.
Absolutely. And do you guys have any information about the research about how mindfulness can help some people who are experiencing, these symptoms and the distressing experiences?
Yeah, totally. So like I mentioned, these disruptions to the reproductive story can be traumatic. And I mean, before I speak to the research, so in my own experience, it's like, I was just like so focused on like the end game, right? I was just like, okay, all I need to do is get pregnant and then I'll be okay, right? So I like actually kind of expect everything to be all better once this would essentially cure me of like all the stress and anxiety and depression that I was experiencing, and that it would like in some way neutralize all the pain that I had from my pregnancy losses. But what I found instead is that the anxiety and the worry that I experienced during my fertility journey, it actually just persisted and it like lingered throughout the pregnancy. So it's almost like this constant roller coaster of hope and disappointment. It had like become my new normal baseline.
Yeah, just thinking the next, I just have to get here and then I'll be okay. And then I'll get here and I'll be okay. And I'll get, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then like I got there and, I just remember being pregnant and just, I couldn't stop. It was like, basically after all of the like worst case scenarios that had unfolded, it was almost like my nervous system was wired to expect something terrible to happen. And I was like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And, I was also super happy and excited, but I was also really struggling with like total anxiety that something terrible was going to happen. And this is a really common thing. Like, so for people, once they, quote unquote, graduate and become pregnant, they can also feel cut adrift from the sources of support that they've come to rely on throughout their fertility journey. So like people who've like graduated from their fertility clinics, right? They can feel cut adrift from that source of support once they're transferred out of care. And then people who have maybe been accessing like infertility or pregnancy loss support groups or forums, their pregnancy, once they're pregnant, they can serve as a trigger for those who are still struggling to become pregnant. So they can no longer really access those community resources and they're kind of really left alone. So we really, that's a really big piece for us. We feel like it's really important to, and it's a very like, it's a very specific experience, right? To be pregnant after, having all these challenges, and then having those challenges kind of carry throughout the pregnancy as well. So, yeah.
Well, and I was just going to say, I think that really, points to how important it is to feel supported and to sort of have that bond develop during pregnancy. Pregnancy can be really hard. And I think it's so important for you to be able to bond with your growing baby and to be able to look forward with excitement. And when you're, sort of still having the experience and, your experiences of pregnancy loss and trauma are feeding into your inability to sort of bond and enjoy your pregnancy, that can be really challenging and even harmful in some cases.
Totally. And then there's like the guilt, right? Like I remember feeling that it was like, I was just super anxious. And so I actually, it was like, I'd worked so hard to get there and I was kind of, finally, hopefully there. And I couldn't even really like enjoy it.
Yeah. And then you feel guilty about not enjoying it. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's such a complex time for people.
Yeah. So I have to say, like in my own pregnancy, it was like, I felt like I was just super anxious the whole time. And so I'd actually had like guilt around not being able to enjoy the pregnancy, because I'd worked so hard together, and I was like finally there, hopefully I was hoping that I was finally there. And I was just having trouble feeling, I don't know, like positive about it. Like I was just super anxious, and I felt actually I had these like complicated layers of like guilt and shame around it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine that that would be a really challenging place to be, and to figure out who can support you for this, because it's such a unique constellation of, life events and, infertility journey that's gotten you to this place. So it must be lonely as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an alienating experience and I mean, part of the reason that we're offering the programs that we are now online is that it's like, I think even extra alienating for people during the pandemic,
Oh,
right?
I know.
Um, but the cool thing, so I mean, so it's finding the right supports, and also like tools, like finding tools to help to support you through the process.
Yeah.
Um, So, obviously, if you're feeling stressed and anxious about your pregnancy, it's super important to seek out support with a counselor
Mhm.
or support group. But like another resource is a mindfulness-based program, right? So
Yeah.
mindfulness it's been shown to help decrease stress and anxiety while increasing resilience and well-being. It has many proven benefits for fertility patients, and has even been shown to reduce the emotional burden of fertility treatments. And then research has shown that when practiced throughout pregnancy, not only can mindfulness help to promote mental health, but it can also actually help make childbirth easier and
Hmm. Hmm.
partner relationships, and yeah, and
Yeah.
parenting. Yeah.
Yeah. I looked into a little bit of that research. And it actually, I think it makes the birth, like exactly like you said, the birth experience. Um, People tend to have more satisfaction with that when
Yeah.
they practice mindfulness through their pregnancy. And that is, I mean, that is one of the whole reasons Alicia and I started She Found Motherhood, was because we, as maternity care providers, it's really disappointing for us when we have all these wonderful pregnant people that are, dissatisfied and disappointed, and just feeling almost guilt sometimes because their birth didn't go the way they expected and planned.
Yeah.
And mindfulness is such a powerful tool for that, right?
Totally. Yeah. Like it's interesting. It's like, it's not about making stress go away. It's about changing our relationship to stress.
Mhm.
Right. And so like so much of stress can be wrapped up in like our, wanting things to be a certain way, like our expectations
Yeah.
or like our resistance to things as they are. And so mindfulness is really about cultivating this sense of, just, deep acceptance. Like that's what it was like for me. So get this, I'm going to tell you, okay? Can I tell you my story?
Okay. Oh,
Um,
I do need to hear it.
so, so okay. So when I found out that I was pregnant with my son, so
Mhm.
this is like after 7+ years of infertility, right? And like two times pregnant, both times miscarried.
Oh, well done.
I was on a 10-day silent meditation retreat. So at the beginning of this retreat,
Mhm.
my period was due. And
Oh,
like I probably at that point could like own shares in like pregnancy tests.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like I was honestly not expecting to have a positive
Yeah.
test.
Yeah.
So my period was due at the beginning of the retreat, and I was expecting it to come, but when it didn't, I did a home pregnancy test and it was positive.
Mhm.
And so here I was. So my husband was actually there, but so when I say silent meditation retreat, I like mean that. Like men and women were like, we were sleeping and eating in separate residences.
Mhm.
We were literally just like meditating all day, morning to night. And the only times that I could even see my husband, we were actually in the meditation hall, at the same time.
Yeah.
And I could see like the back of his head, like across the hall, like on
Ah,
the
oh my
side.
gosh.
It was like,
And you're like pregnant. You can't tell him.
it was crazy. And so like there was just no way of even like trying to sneak over to tell him, right? Like there was no, it would just be so conspicuous.
Yeah.
Like I'd have to like cross the gender divide and like,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
could like hear a pin drop. Everybody was
Yeah.
literally just sitting in silence.
Silent.
So I had to just like sit with it. I was like trapped there. And I had to sit with it with like all the thoughts and feelings. So of course I was like excited, I was elated, but I was also super terrified. Like my only experience of pregnancy was miscarrying, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, I just had to sit there and be with it all without uttering a word about it to anyone, right? I couldn't like call my OB for early monitoring. I couldn't like go for acupuncture support from my friends and colleagues. I couldn't even tell my husband. And so my only option was to just like sit there, right? And like anchor myself in like the steadiness of my breath, and just like practiced watching like the storm of thoughts and emotions like go through my mind, and like trying not to react to them, try not to judge them, and try not to let them take me over, take over me. So it was like a culmination of like the whole journey, right? Like in this experience. And so I have to say, like, ultimately, it's like what you say, ultimately, my mindfulness practice, like it gave me this, like inner space and like calm to to recognize, right? Like what I could take good care of and what I did have control over.
Yeah.
While also cultivating this kind of like openness and like deep acceptance of whatever outcome I didn't have control over. So like it allowed me to make peace with the unknown of the future.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right? By helping me to accept and find ease in the present moment. And so that's what it's all about, people. Like it's so helpful. And if you can imagine, that's what it was. It was like every little twitch. I was like, oh my God, am I miscarrying? I was like going to the bathroom, checking my underwear.
Yeah, right.
Like, any kind of cramping or twitching, I was like, oh my God, this is it. I'm miscarrying. But I had to just, I actually couldn't freak out. I was just, I was freaking out inside, but I had to just sort of be with it.
Well, and it's so interesting. I love your story, and thank you for sharing. And I am like a Western medicine physician, clearly, but I'm a huge proponent and believer in mindfulness. And one thing I often say to my patients is like that, and my husband, who's also a physician, said this to me. He's like, we're not just a brain, right? Like our nervous system goes throughout our entire body. And so sometimes we just want to a quick fix, but, and people are like, oh, I'm not into meditation. And I'm like, but mindfulness doesn't have to mean meditation, right? Like they're not actually the same. And I like how you talked about, you have all these thoughts, right? It's not about emptying your brain. It's about acknowledging and accepting and, becoming at peace with what is happening in the present moment. And what a powerful experience for you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you're right. Like there is this total misconception, right? It's like we have this idea that mindfulness is about like clearing the mind, like stopping the thoughts.
Yeah, right. Good luck, Sarah.
I think the mind's like designed to think.
Totally.
Right? Designed to think. That's it. It's an organ. That's what it does.
Yeah.
And it would take total superpowers to try to stop it from doing what it's like meant to do, right? So it's not about stopping the thoughts. It's about changing your relationship to them, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's like they could be like a pack of dogs and like dragging us, there's this what is it? There's this one way that it's been described to me. It's like being on a horse, a wild horse. It's just like running.
Yeah.
Right? So often it's like my body's here, but my mind is just like off somewhere. And we tend to have the same thoughts that we did yesterday, right?
Yeah.
The majority of them. And so it's kind of like being on a wild horse that's running, and somebody, you pass somebody, they're like, where are you going? And it's like, I don't know, the horse is carrying me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so mindfulness is kind of about like, being in touch with that horse, basically, right?
Yeah.
And instead of letting it control you, like you kind of having more agency, having a relationship with the horse, with the thoughts in such a way that there's more agency and choice, and recognizing that they're not actually necessarily the truth. I have all kinds of thoughts that are not true. We all do, right?
Totally.
So just cultivating that space so we can see that. One person actually described it to me like this, right? So at some point when our lifestyle changed, we weren't, before we just had more active lifestyles because just society was different.
We had to survive.
When we started jogging, like just running for nothing, like not going anywhere.
Yeah.
we're like, what are you doing, you
Yes.
weirdo?
Yeah.
Running
Yeah.
to nowhere. But it was because we were like becoming more sedentary, and we were realizing that, oh, actually exercise is good for the body,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
So I think mindfulness is a similar thing. It's actually an exercise for the brain.
absolutely.
So, and it actually changes the shape of the brain, right? So
Yes.
it's like, it's no different from like a bicep curl, right? So, when we are practicing mindfulness, we're actually like, there's neuroplasticity happening, and we're creating new neural pathways. And so the program, let me tell you a bit about our program.
Yeah.
The programs that we're offering are based on the mindfulness-based stress reduction curriculum, so the MBSR curriculum. So this is an 8-week program that was developed in the late 1970s by a molecular biologist named Dr. John Kabat-Zinn
I love him.
at the university. I know, right?
He's amazing.
Massachusetts, yeah. And so he, he's just offered this. I mean, he has kind of translated this practice. So it's an ancient Eastern practice. We've got to name it, otherwise it's cultural appropriation. But so he has taken, and he's sort of like, he has put it in this sort of like scientific language, right? And like, you don't need to have any kind of specific background to, it's literally just an exercise for the brain. It's a practice. I mean, it's not just like this robotic thing. There's a heartfulness to it as well.
Yeah.
But it's become a standard, right? This particular curriculum. So it's got like 40 years of research behind it. And so it's like the most scientifically tested and well-established mindfulness program to date. And it's offered in a variety of settings, like around the world, including hospitals, clinics, and universities. And so this program, they've done research on it, and they've actually been able to measure physical changes in the brain with fMRI scans after this particular 8-week program. Because, research, like, they've got to standardize it, right? So this program is the standard. And so what they've found is that it actually rewires the brain, mindfulness. So the physical changes in the brain that are visible on the fMRI scans on the graduates of this program are a decreased activation and reduced size of the amygdala, which is like the primitive part of the brain that's related to fight, flight, or freeze and the stress response. And then an increased activation and increased size and thickened cortex in the prefrontal lobes, which are related to positive emotions and problem solving. So this part of the brain supports our capacity to concentrate and to manage strong emotions so that we can respond to stressful situations with more flexibility when we're overwhelmed. And effectively, it helps us to recover more sustainably from stress. So it increases our resilience. So it's really, so I don't know, that's what it is. It's exercise for the brain. And it's kind of like jogging. Like, at some point we're going to be like, right now it's totally weird. It's like, what are you doing? You're doing nothing. You're really not doing, you're just being. Like, why? What's the point? But it's actually good for our brain health and the evolution of our brains, right? Stress is different. Like, when we were primitive people, it was like we had to survive. Like, the stresses were actually being chased by predators.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, the amygdala is really important for that. And so it's still important for that, but it's like, we're not actually in danger. Now it's like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in traffic, or like, oh my gosh, I have to pay $10,000 to, try and make a baby, or like, it's sort of stress is, it's different, but we're still having the same physiological responses. And, stress can have a negative impact on our physical health as well.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know. I think we're in a revolution. We're in a like mindfulness revolution.
Oh, I do too. It's really interesting. I was at this, pre-COVID when we could travel. I was at this one day sort of like, for lack of a better word, motivational speaking event. And Molly Bloom spoke. Do you know Molly Bloom?
I don't. Tell me
She
about
was, there's a movie about her called Molly's Game, I think. She was an Olympic athlete. She was a mogul skier. And then she had a really traumatic fall because there was like a twig on her course. Anyways, and then she started this like poker network, super weird, tangential. I am going somewhere with this. And then there's a huge movie about her life experience, but she was one of the speakers at this event. And she said, and this would have been like 2 years ago now, that she meditated every morning. And, as a former Olympic athlete, she's just like, it is exercise for my brain. It is how I train my brain, right? To deal with like stress. And so like with you saying that, it's exactly like what she said every morning. It's like, I train my body and then I train my brain. And I think that there's so much potential. Like you said, like we're just at the beginning of a mindfulness revolution. And I think we're at the place where it's, educating people about what mindfulness is and about what the research shows about how impactful and beneficial it can be.
Totally.
So powerful.
It's super powerful. Like we can change our brains, right? Like the actual physical shape of it, and which changes our, mindfulness allows us to recognize what our habitual thought patterns are, right? Because those can be really limiting. It's like our perspective can really limit how we perceive a problem, or perceive anything, which can then influence how we respond to it. So it's about the shift from like automaticity, like autopilot, to intentionality.
Totally.
Right? Which changes everything. Like how many times, sometimes like I drive my car, I'm driving and I get home and I actually don't like remember driving. I don't remember how I got there.
I use that example all the time for people because they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's crazy how inattentive you can be in your day.
Yeah.
And we're always living in the past. We're thinking about what we did and what we could have done differently, or we're thinking about the future and how we're going to act or what we're going to do, or right. Like we're not in the now. And it's so detrimental to our being and to like our life satisfaction and joy and experience.
Yeah. There's so much more available to us, right? In the moment than we're often aware of, right? So this practice is about remembering that. And how many times is like I'm doing one thing and my mind is just like off somewhere else, especially, with like, when you're dealing with fertility and loss and like there's so, and trauma, right? It's not so simple, but it's like there's so much of my time, for example, was just like worrying about, what happened in the past happening again. And there's some validity to that. It's not about being like complacent, right? There's still things, we have to do. There's still choice and agency, but I was missing out. Like there's a way in which my brain was wired. Our brains have a negative bias, right? Like when we were, back in the day when we were primitive people, it was like the survivors weren't the people who stopped to smell the flowers.
Exactly.
It was like, they'd see a dot on the horizon. It was like the people who were like, oh, that's danger. I got to get out of here. They were the ones who survived. So this negative bias has really served us. And so our brains, our brains are like Velcro to negative and like on to positive. So we have to really work hard actually to create those neural pathways, to create positive implicit memories, to actually stop and enjoy pleasant, like moments where it's like you watch a sunset, right? You could drive by a sunset and not even notice it. But if you stop and like notice it, it's like this beautiful experience. And it's like you're watering these seeds of like, of like happiness and contentment. And, so it's not necessarily about, like weeding out the negative experiences. They're just as valid. But we just our brains are just programmed to really over focus on those. So we have to really work hard to not let those, take over all the time. And we have to actually, it's like exercise for the brain to create new neural pathways to notice what else is going on, what else is available to us in the moment.
Exactly. Well, and like an example that I often give, and I can't take credit for coming up with this, but it's like, those sort of like negative, easy pathways are like well-worn, treads in the mud or paths in the wood, which is just easier to go down that, right? Than to go and, tread your own path or, bushwhack your own trail, right? And that's what mindfulness is doing, is it's creating those new pathways. And it's hard at first, right? You have to be really intentional. But over time, it becomes, the choosing the joy and choosing to be in the present moment becomes more intuitive and more natural, right?
Yeah. It's like building a muscle, right?
Totally.
So it's like bicep curls. Like after you do it a little bit every day and over time, it's like, oh, that my bicep is stronger.
Yeah.
Like it can respond and yeah. So it's the same. It's the same.
Mhm.
It's the same.
Yeah, exactly. And do you have any experience or can you share about how mindfulness might be, impactful in the postpartum period as well, right? Because that's a whole other challenging time for new parents, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, like the research actually shows that when practiced throughout pregnancy, mindfulness can actually enhance parenting sensitivity as
Mhm.
well as child well-being too. So it's like a lifelong skill, really, right? Mindfulness, it's got many benefits.
Mhm.
And I think particularly in pivotal times, um, where there's potentially a lot of change. Um, so like the postpartum phase and also for parenting. So it's like,
Everything is so hard.
yeah, that's right. It's like that, right? So if you can, it's kind of like it's shifting from autopilot to being, right? So, you know, I I mean, how many times am I in my own experience like just sort of knee jerk, reacting to difficult situations?
Yep.
And I just have my ways of thinking, right?
Mhm.
Um, but what mindfulness does is it kind of creates this space so that I can actually recognize. So a lot of it, for example, one of the practices in mindfulness is like breath awareness. I mean, it's like, you know, trying to anchor your attention on a particular focus. And it's interesting because in the practice, so I might be kind of focusing on my breaths, say at the belly, right? So the
Mhm.
direct sensation. So it's strengthening these neural pathways for interoception, um, so that when I'm in a charged situation, I'm able to. It's hard to interrupt. When we have big feelings, it's kind of hard to stop and interrupt. We're in a storm, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of like it's been described as like being in the ocean and like there's a storm at the top, at the surface, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we can kind of get caught up in the storm and thrown around. But what mindfulness does is it allows us to kind of drop down under the surface of the ocean, under the storm, into the depths of the ocean, where it is more still. There's more stillness and there's more
Mhm.
calm. So it doesn't stop the storm. It's not about not having the storm. It's not about stopping it. It's not about any of that. It's about finding a place where you can almost like you know take refuge and observe with some space that there is a storm going on. So then it helps you to be able to ride it out. Whereas if you're just in it, you're kind of being thrown around in it, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of like postpartum or with parenting, I mean, with parenting, oh my Lord, it's like, you know, like it's such a practice, right? So as children grow and develop, we're forced to also grow
Mhm.
and like navigate, helping them as they navigate their growing pains and developmental leaps, which can be periods of major stress and vulnerability, right? And I
Totally.
mean, for me, it's like, oh my God, I don't know about you, but it's like I find myself like I'll say something and it's just in there. It's just in it's like something that my
Yeah.
parents would have said,
Totally.
that I grew up kind of being like, oh my God, I'll never say that to my kid.
No, I
But
know.
it's
And then
just
out it
there.
comes.
It's like you said, it's like you said, it's like this well-trodden path.
Yeah.
So it's just easy. It's autopilot. I go down that route and then I'm just like, oh my, did I just say that? Who am I even?
I know. I know. It's so funny.
Right.
Some of the expressions that we don't even know are in there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, with postpartum, it's like, I think especially, I'm going to just speak to my personal experience of just like
Please.
working
Yeah.
so hard to get to this place. And then I have this baby and I'm just like, and breastfeeding hurts.
Yeah, I
I
know.
hate it. And I'm like, I finally have this baby and it should be magical. And it hurts and I can't stand nursing because it hurts. And then I just have these layers of guilt and shame.
Mhm.
So like my mindfulness, actually, it allowed me to recognize what was going on as it was going on. Right.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
like it increases our capacity to self-regulate and to respond because it increases our awareness.
Yeah.
We're exercising our muscles of awareness. And it's the awareness alone. That's all it is. It's just shining light of awareness. And that's all it takes, really.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Um,
So powerful. And
because
it's so powerful. Like it seems so simple, right? But it's a
yeah,
practice that
it's
takes,
totally, yeah, it
yeah.
takes some like diligence for sure. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's simple and it is also, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
real practice. Like going to the gym, like, even like going to the gym and like taking care of our physical bodies in that way, it's like, for me, it's a lot to get there. And then even at first I'm like, oh man, I don't like this. This sucks.
I know.
This is hard work.
Mhm.
I just I'd really way rather be doing other things than this, but it takes sort of determination and
Yeah.
a certain level of I don't know, yeah, just like diligence and determination.
Yeah.
And then it gets easier,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you get the felt sense of like, oh, okay, yeah. And I mean, not to say, like now, even like I've been practicing for so long, but I have hard days. It's not like it's not about having blissful experiences.
Yeah.
It's about being able to be with her experience,
Yeah.
like whatever's happened.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know. It's so powerful. So tell me a little bit about the course. I'm curious now. Is it
Yeah,
online?
yeah.
Is it sort of like access at your own, or is it groups
Yeah,
at
yeah. So
times?
they're live. They're live. They're online. Again, they follow the programs that we offer. So Stephanie and I are both trained in facilitating the MBSR curriculum, so the mindfulness-based stress reduction curriculum that is used as a standard in a lot of the research on the benefits of mindfulness. So the course itself, it's online. It's 26 hours. It's educational and skills based. And yeah, it creates this safe and supportive space, online space for participants so they can connect with one another and they can share in their experiences. And then it also, helps them to learn techniques and tools, right? Because it's one thing to just kind of like talk
Mhm.
about what's going on over and over, but then it's one thing to also be able to develop some skills to deal with what's going on, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so we meet online together once a week for 2.5 hours, for 8 weeks. And then there's a day-long retreat that's online. So, you can access it from the comfort of your own home. And this happens at about the midpoint of the course. And classes are highly experiential. They include guided practice in like sitting meditation, body scan awareness, some very gentle movements and stretching. Yeah, and it's been going well. I mean, so far the feedback that's being shared and the intimacy that has been forming in the groups has just been incredible and super heartwarming. I think there's something really special about having your experience like validated and
Mhm.
normalized,
Mhm.
right? When you're sharing with a group of people who can totally relate.
Yeah.
Um, and we've had participants from like across BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, even like the US. There's been quite a diverse range of gender and like gender expression, ethnicities, single people, couples, LGBTQ plus, people who have gone through natural conception, assisted reproductive conception. Yeah, so it's been encouraging, and the program just feels relevant to a wide range of experiences.
Yeah.
And in addition to the program that we're speaking to today, which is the mindfulness for those who are pregnant after infertility and pregnancy, we are also offering programs for primary infertility and secondary infertility, and they're all by donation.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That's amazing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think especially, how it came to be. This, I have to say, I was like, really? And Stephanie was like, yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Yeah.
Because she had some programming that she was offering, and then the shutdown happened, for the
Mm,
pandemic. She
yeah.
realized,
Yeah.
wow, I have to shut my clinic down, and like I wouldn't be able to access these programs that I'm offering.
Yeah.
And she had nothing else going on anyways because we were in a shutdown. So she decided to just offer them. And in a lot of like traditional in a lot of sort of mindfulness traditions, it's offered in this way, right? So the donation is made at the end of the program.
Mm,
And it's so by then it's like you have a sense of like what kind of value
yeah.
it has for you, and what how it's helped you. And it's about paying it forward, right? And so it's really beautiful because especially during the pandemic, it's like some people, it
Mhm.
hasn't really changed their financial situation, but for other people it really has,
Mhm.
right? And it's already a stressful enough experience dealing with infertility, pregnancy loss, being pregnant after having dealt with these challenges.
Yeah.
But then during a pandemic, it's like multifold, like it's just even more stressful, right? And so we're just really aware that there's even a bigger need. And so those who can afford to donate, what it would normally cost, they do. And those who can't, just donate what they can. And it all works out, and it really helps us to be able to continue to provide it for future cohorts. So it's really, and for us, it's just so like meaningful and valuable for us, right? To be able to help and support people during this time.
Oh, it's so great. Well, and you've made it so accessible, right? Which is what I love about it, because, resources are limited, right? Especially for this particular population. And like you said, it is a very, unique group of individuals, right? So to make such valuable programming available and accessible, it's amazing. So what, how can I send people to you guys?
Right. Yes. So
Yeah.
we have a website. It's mindfulnessforfertility.com.
Okay.
And all of our program information and dates are on there, and you can register online through that website as well.
Amazing. So I have a question though. How did you and Stephanie connect?
Yeah. So here's the story. So we, just through the Chinese medicine community, right?
Yeah.
And so I was offering some programs earlier on when I first, earlier on in my career.
Yeah.
And Stephanie contacted me and wanted to come and check them out, because she wanted to offer similar programming to her patients in Victoria. So she came out and she sat in one of my programs, and we had tea. And here's the thing.
Yeah.
We were both trying to conceive at the time, and neither of us actually talked about that with each other.
Right?
Yeah, because it's just super private. And and also we both worked in the field, right? So it's just, I don't know, I wanted to have control over, often I would just burst out crying. And I didn't have necessarily control over that all the time. So I just wanted to have some control over that. And so I didn't talk about it. And so then when we both had our children, we were like, oh my God, really? Wow. And we just really bonded over this experience. And because we have, we're both mindfulness practitioners, and of course, both of our personal experiences were really supported by our mindfulness practice.
Yeah.
We're like, let's do this. Let's do something together. Let's collaborate and offer this to others. And that's how it happened.
That's so great. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm just so excited to share this. Thank you so much for sharing your story and, chatting with us today. I will put the link to your website in the show notes below. And I look forward to hopefully collaborating in some way, shape, or form with you again soon.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me on your show, on your podcast.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca and to sign up for our community for weekly bump blasts. Make sure to check us out on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood, and head on over to your favorite podcast app and leave a review and a 5-star rating. If you enjoyed this podcast, take a pic of yourself listening to it and share it on social. Make sure to tag us on it so we know to keep making them.